Wondered what you would think about if you knew you were about to die? When I first saw this image, the question that I asked myself was, is this person dead? Because this was the view that I had when I was being stretchered off mile 25 of the Chicago Marathon in 2007. In fact, my view was worse. I'd been running in the 35-degree heat for about 4 hours, and I'd become delirious. And so I'd kept running, even though several of my toenails had already fallen off. My other toenails were black, and my legs were blue and bloated, and they looked like the legs of somebody who'd been drowned. I was vomiting and barely conscious. And in that moment, what did I think about? Well, I'll tell you that in a second, but first of all, I want you to tell me something. Where do you want to be in 10 years? There's a few grimaces there. I know it's an irritating question. It's irritating because you'll have been asked it so many times by professors, career counsellors, job interviewers. That's not going to stop. So tell me, where do you want to be in 10 years? Maybe 5 is a bit easier. So raise your hand if you know what sector you'd like to work in 5 years. That's quite a few of you. And also raise your hand if you know around about how much you might want to be earning 5 years from now. Okay, some people are very sure about that. And this is how we're taught to plan a successful career. I mean, for those of you who didn't put up your hand, I recently saw that there was a website launched that even won an innovation award, where as a graduate you can filter careers by their earning potential 10 years from now. There's even a section on there for GCSE students, well, age 13 to 14-year-olds, who want to choose their GCSEs based on the potential earning power of those collections of GCSEs much later in their life. So we're taught to plan a successful career in this way, but I think that's completely wrong. Now, let me share with you 3 experiences that I've had about how that question and its alternative have guided my decisions, because I want to convince you that it's completely imperative we ask ourselves a different question. When I was at university, I was desperate to decide what it was that I wanted to work on. And so I spent hours in the basement of the University Careers Library on this survey software that was designed to tell you exactly what your perfect job should be. And it told me I should be a librarian, which was great. I took that to be more of a comment on the adequacy of the software than my personality. And so I ignored that and decided to do what all of my friends were doing, which was work in management consulting. I applied for lots of jobs. I was lucky enough to have 2 interviews. And I got offers from both of those places. One of them was a very large, all-encompassing, big money firm that you will definitely all have heard of. I remember sitting on the gigantic leather sofas in their reception, watching as all these sharp-suited consultants, all with the Financial Times tucked under their arm, were coming up this very short escalator into their lobby. And I remember thinking, these guys look exactly like the pictures on their website. You know, people like this? You know where I'm talking about, right? The other offer was from a very small public sector consultancy that you definitely won't have heard of. That interview was a little bit different. Their office was the attic of a townhouse in Westminster. There was no reception. And when I rang the doorbell, it was answered by somebody wearing board shorts and flip-flops, and for some reason carrying a tea towel. And at that place, while I was waiting for my interview, I met all 6 people who worked there. They gave me strawberries, and in the interview we talked about what we cared about. We talked about the impact of their work and what motivated them. And it was a very tricky decision choosing between these 2 options, because my head said, go with the big name. Go with the bigger salary, the formal training programme, the CV points, and the doors open in your future. And my heart said, go with the place where they only work with the public sector, and where they're driven by wanting to make the world a better place. Now, I was about to go with my head and choose the path that would lead me to what would be most likely to make me successful 10 years from now, when somebody said to me, how long are you going to choose things for the sake of your CV? And that was enough to jolt me into realising I was about to make a decision for entirely the wrong reasons. And it helped me to set other people's expectations to one side. So I chose the public sector consultancy. And although it made my friends gasp in horror, my parents too probably, but they were too supportive to let on at the time, if that's what they were thinking, I never regretted the decision for a moment. I never regretted not having that big name on my CV. After a while of working in this consultancy, although I enjoyed it a huge amount, I realised that working with local councils wasn't my passion, and I wanted to find something that I could really put my heart and soul into. I tested out working in Zambia for a year in development work and realised that that wasn't for me either. So I returned to the UK having decided to work on climate change. But I was torn. I'd become accustomed to a larger than average management consulting salary. And to be honest, I was reluctant to give it up for the kind of salaries that the NGOs were able to offer. So at that point, I made a real mistake. I took a job that looked good on paper. It had the all-important job title, important-sounding brand name, famous name that you'd all recognise again, and the corporate salary. And after a while of working there, although the job was in sustainability, I realised that that was just a nod to my original intentions. The environment was not high on anybody's priority list. And as you now know, it took the sight of those nearly dead feet at mile 25 of the Chicago Marathon to snap me out of it. Because I can tell you now that what I was thinking at that point was that I'd been guided by entirely the wrong question. I'd made a decision based on the question, where do I want to be in 10 years? I asked myself at the time, is what I'm doing worth anything? And the answer was, it wasn't. So if that's the wrong question, what's the right question? Well, it's something that I intuitively knew when I was at university, but it took the horror of those feet and the Chicago Marathon to make me fully articulate to myself. And it's this: where would you like the world to be in 10 years? And what are you prepared to do about that? Now, that's a better question, not because it's easier to answer. Now, I'm sure we can all come up with lots of things that we'd like to change about the world. I see a few people nodding. But it's really hard to decide which of those things you want to work on. No, it's a better question because it enables you to set other people's expectations to one side. And once you've done that, you can genuinely start to figure out where you should be working. Now, on returning from the Chicago Marathon, I obviously wrote my resignation letter very quickly, much more quickly than it took for my feet to start to look normal again. And that gave me the luxury of some time to think about what I wanted to change about the world. there was one particular issue at the time that I thought I might be able to make a difference to. It was that lots of big companies had started to go carbon neutral. So there's lots of businesses wanting to put money into environmental projects. But at the same time, the environmental NGOs were bringing up issues, real issues with carbon offsetting. And so the companies were getting bad publicity for doing essentially what was aimed at doing good. And I thought that's a bit of a shame. Is there no other way that we can get these guys to spend money on environmental projects without them getting bad publicity for it? And a friend and I came up with an idea for how we might be able to do that. It was by removing credits from the European Emissions Trading Scheme, of which there are a fixed number, by using the offset cash to buy these credits and then take them out of the system so they couldn't be used by heavy industry. We set up the social enterprise, and at times it was a real struggle. I have had at that time no experience of setting up a business, no experience of HR, no experience of marketing, no experience of company accounts or any kind of accounts, in fact. And I wasn't a naturally confident person, but I found myself sitting on the front row of events asking the challenging questions of MPs and of company chief executives. I even cold called journalists quite often to try and get the stories that I cared about in the news. I'd found my purpose, and eventually it started to work out. We got some clients that you might have heard of, the UK Committee on Climate Change, a FTSE 100 company, Radiohead. I became much more confident, and even the journalists started to call me. And we had a successful business. It was because we cared. It was because we believed it mattered. And it was because I'd gone into it not asking myself that question, where do I want to be? But asking myself the question, where do I want the world to be? Now, this story might start to sound a little familiar. It's become quite fashionable in academic circles to say that nice people and nice businesses do better. And so you ought to be nice for selfish reasons, because it'll make you more successful. There's lots of academic studies that set out to prove this. Businesses that do corporate social responsibility are more profitable. There was one last year that said CEOs that communicate their purpose are more likely to attract investment, have more loyal employees, and ultimately will earn more. And the people that want to tell that story could easily use me as a case study. At the moment, I have a job as head of a climate and low carbon technology centre at the National Physical Laboratory. I'm managing a portfolio of £8 million worth of projects with a really big impact, measuring emissions and helping companies develop new renewables. I was made a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and named by Management Today as one of the UK's top non-profiteers. And last year, I even got to speak on a panel with Al Gore at Davos. And the conclusion of that kind of a case study would say something like, you ought to think about where you want the world to be 10 years from now and what you're prepared to do about that, because it will make you more successful. It will help you to earn more. But let me tell you, there is no way that I would have launched the social enterprise that I did if I was thinking about where I wanted to be. There is no way. Yes, it got me to where I am now, but I didn't do it in order to get here. I did it because I cared. I'm saying the opposite of that case study. That case study is a way of asking the question, where do you want to be in 10 years? It just teaches you a less obvious route to get there, doing good. I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying you've got to forget the material stuff completely. Because for all the academic literature about purpose driving big profits and big salaries, doing what you care about will be great, even if those things don't happen. So when you inevitably get asked that irritating question again, where do you want to be in 10 years? Are you going to tell people how much you want to be earning? I hope that you'll tell them that's not what matters. I hope that you'll tell them where you want the world to be in 10 years and what you're prepared to do about that. And then I hope you'll ask them what they're doing. Good luck and thank you.